Hey gang, hope you had a nice and scary Halloween. The weather was miserable where I live and we didn't have many trick-or-treaters, so that kinda sucked. Anywho, here's a couple of crazy glitch in the Matrix stories for this week. Back with another longer volume next week. This one is shorter, but I was wicked busy at work this week and went to a concert during the week, so kinda didn't have a lot of time to be doing any recording. So anyway, let's get after it. I Experienced a Time Slip by Scott's Beater 2-liter. This actually happened only a couple of days ago. I live in Plattsburgh, New York, United States. Just talking about this story makes me want to piss my pants. Anyways, let's start. It was an average night in my hometown. I just got done eating dinner and I was feeling awfully tired. It was only about 8:06, but I decided to go to bed early anyway. I slept really good, and I woke up around 7 in the morning, and I noticed something strange outside my window, almost as if the buildings in my neighbors' houses were a slightly different color. Then again, I did just wake up. I decided to have some Cheerios, and I went to go get some milk from my fridge. However, I was out of milk. Oh, what the hell, I said to myself loudly. I was a little angry that I was out of milk, but I decided to go to Dollar General to get some more. I own a motorcycle and a car, and I decided just to take my motorcycle, and maybe some fresh air would help wake me up. When I got to the intersection, I noticed there were no stoplights. There were just those blinking lights or whatever they're called. There was usually stoplights here. I shrugged it off and continued my journey to the store. The thing that I noticed that was very odd is even though it was supposed to be morning, it looked like the sun was high in the sky in the afternoon. At this point, I was approaching the street Dollar General was on. And when I finally approached the store, I slammed on my brakes. There was a construction site where Dollar General was supposed to be. At first I thought, did they tear the store down? Why would they? There was a construction worker over at the site. I parked my motorcycle on the side of the road and went over there, not caring if I got into trouble for trespassing. And this is how the conversation went. Construction worker. Hey, you're not allowed around here. Me. Dude, why the hell are they tearing down the Dollar General? Construction worker. Huh? How do you know this is a Dollar General? Also, we're not tearing it down, we're building on it. You need to get out of here right now. This is authorized personnel only. This is not exactly how the conversation went, but it was something close to it. When I heard the construction worker say this, I almost fainted. I ran from the area, hopped on my motorcycle, and sped off back to my house. That's when I saw another car in my driveway. I legit felt like I wanted to be in a mental hospital. I didn't have my phone with me at all. I once again got back on my motorcycle and sped off the other direction towards Dollar General again. This time when I arrived, the sky was dark, and Dollar General was there, and there were cars and everything. Everything was back to normal now. I stopped on the side of the road and looked at the Dollar General. I just had the 1,000-yard stare when, out of nowhere, a state trooper came up behind me with his lights on. He got out of his car and told me that I was going 65 in a 30. I told him my experience, and I tried to convince him as much as I could to believe me. He just looked at me and said, "Yeah, that's going to happen sometimes." I gave him my driver's license and everything, and he ran it through his computer, and surprisingly didn't give me a ticket, and just let me off with a warning. It looked like it was going to rain, so I went back to my house. This time I asked a friend if he wanted to stay the night, just in case something like this happened again. And he did stay the night, but nothing happened. Ever since this occurrence, I always want someone to stay the night at my house out of fear that I might go through this again. It was extremely scary. The Long Bike Ride, submitted by Z-Man. This happened a long time ago when I was training for triathlons. There was one coming up at Raystown Lake, PA, and I wanted to compete stronger than I had in the past. My wife and I lived in a town called Chambersburg, and one Saturday we were going to go visit her parents who lived over in Breezewood. I thought this would be the perfect way to break in my new Cervelo P3. I had just gotten it, but hadn't put it through its paces yet. I mapped out a route of back roads. I didn't and still don't like riding on busy roads, mainly for the stop-and-go nature of them. This route would take me east, then south around some state land, back north, east, south again, and then loop up to Breezewood. All told, 60-65 miles or so. I figure with the hills and a decent cadence, I would get there in about 3 hours. My wife was going to take my Jeep with our roof rack and meet me there with a change of clothes and my shower stuff. I was pumped. I set out around 10 a.m. My wife wasn't going to leave until around noon, as it was only like an hour by car. Off I went with my cell, my ID, a couple of bucks, water bottles, and Cliff Bars. It was an awesome spring day, and my new ride was smooth as silk. I did stop to make an adjustment to get my derailleur, and another time to get more water, but other than that, it was just a great day for a ride. I was making great time and rolling through the countryside. I got back onto Route 30 and got to just south of Valley High to head south, about an hour and a half left to go. My wife called me, so I stopped to answer it, and she said she was leaving in a bit and asked how I was. I told her great and that I'd see her soon. I said I was just turning onto South Valley Road and said goodbye and I was going to get rolling again. I was so lost in the beauty of everything turning green again from the gray and brown of winter. Just kept moving. I made my turn to start heading north to Breezewood, and I got into town feeling like a champ not long after. I rolled into my in-laws' driveway looking at my computer and seeing that I had made the trip in just over 3 hours at a 20-mile-an-hour pace. That's when the front door banged open and my wife came running out, screaming at me and grabbing and hugging me. She kept saying, "Where were you? Where were you?" I looked at her strangely and said, "What are you talking about? I followed my route. You had a copy of it, and damn if I'm not the man for making it in great time." Her mom came out looking worried and said, "Oh, thank heavens you're okay." "What's with you guys?" I asked. My wife pulled away from me and said, "You've been gone for 7 hours. It's just after 5 and we couldn't find you." "What?" I said. Apparently, when I didn't show up after 4 hours, she started calling me, but my phone went to voicemail. Just then her father pulled up with a look of relief on his face and said, "Where the hell were you, son?" I laid my bike down in the grass, grabbing a water bottle, and sat on the porch before stretching and looking at everyone like they were nuts. So, this is how it played out. After 4.5 hours of me not being there and not answering my phone, her father took off in his truck to backtrack the route I was coming in on and went up and down it 3 times without seeing me on South Valley Road at all. I was dumbfounded. "I don't get this," I said, and I pointed to my computer. The mileage was right on, and the time was there. 3 hours, 12 minutes, 61 miles. They all looked at it and couldn't believe it. Hell, I couldn't believe it now either. But there we were on the lawn of the house at 5:22 in the afternoon. Everyone was just glad I was safe and sound, and we proceeded with the night as normal. My wife said she was just about to call the police when I rolled up. We talk about it to this day still, and it's never happened again. But somehow I lost 4 hours of that day. I put no stock in UFOs and that nonsense, but I still can't explain how it happened. Footnote: I did well at the triathlon, placing second in my age group. The Lodge by Name Goes Here. This one maybe isn't the scariest you'll read today, but it is true. I've always been fascinated by out-of-time and or space stories. Most of us have had the experience of pulling into our driveway with no memory of having driven there. Stuff like that. Driving hypnosis is the most common explanation, like going on autopilot. But I'm not talking about that. I was around 13, and the thing to do on a Friday night in February was go skiing at the local slopes. The place was open until 1 a.m., but I didn't drive, and my mom didn't stay up that late, so my friend Mary and I needed to be in front of the lodge, skis ready to go up on the rack at 11. Not 11:02, not 11:03, 11. It was a beautiful, clear night with a big, bright moon. Uncomfortably cold, but we were young and tough, so we stayed out and skied, despite painful fingers and toes. Besides, we had just met a couple of 13-year-old guys, and we were trying to impress them. It was about 10:15, and we were at the top of a slope. The wind had picked up, and we were absolutely freezing, to the point where it just wasn't fun anymore. We skied halfway down one slope, and then decided to take a cutoff to a trail that ended up closest to the lodge. We were done for the night. Halfway across the cutoff, there was a small, unmarked but passable trail headed down. I had never noticed it before, although I had grown up skiing this place. The boys wanted to try it, and I absolutely did not. Mary was more adventurous than me, though. Okay, fine, she was maturing faster than I was, uncomfortably so, and our decade-old friendship was nearing its end. And with the boys, I was outvoted. And being 13, being seen as lame and chicken was about as bad as it gets, so I went along. We skied down the trail until it dead-ended at a little lodge. It was obviously old and no longer in use, but we were freezing, so we decided that if it had a door open, we'd go in just to get out of the wind. Just for a minute. It did, and we did go in. The place was a stone and log cabin style, small but very cute. The main room was an open space with a dusty stone floor, and any furniture that might have been there had been removed long ago. The only other room was a small kitchen, with counters and cupboards, but empty spaces where the appliances had been removed. We sat on the dusty floor of the main room, just talking and laughing and awkwardly flirting as 13-year-olds do. At some point, someone mentioned being hungry, and the rest of us agreed. One of the boys, Mark I think his name was, offered to search the kitchen for food. I thought this was a waste of time, it was obviously empty, but he went anyway. He came back with 4 of those packaged honey buns like in the checkout line at the grocery store, and 4 juice boxes. They were reasonably fresh, and they didn't have an expiration date on them, and they were tasty. It seems obviously odd looking back, but at the time, no one thought to question this. It was one of those times where it just seemed right that the food should be there for us when we needed it. Anyway, we stayed hanging out there on the dusty floor of that old, unused lodge for a long, long time. Hours. No one had a watch, so we weren't sure how many, but when it finally occurred to me that we should probably get going, I was sure that we were well past curfew, and I even wondered if the place had closed down, it was that late. I was extremely dead. You did not make my mother wait. She had no patience for children who weren't at the pickup spot on time. She once left my older brother in the middle of a city to find his own way home, but that's a different story. I was sick and near tears with dread as we were skiing down the path to where it would meet back up with the main slope. Fortunately, when we rejoined the main trail, the lights were on and it was still full of people, so it wasn't 1 a.m. yet. Small favors, right? We skied down to the lodge and immediately looked at the big clock on the side of the building. I didn't want to, but I had to know. It was 10:45. There was no possible way it was 10:45. We were in that lodge for hours. But it was 10:45. I said to Mary, "How is it?" She just shook her head and didn't say anything. We never talked about it, that night or after. Mary and I never skied together again after that. We grew apart and stopped being friends, as 13-year-old girls do. I skied that slope every winter until I left home, though, and every single time, I took that cutoff and looked for that trail. It wasn't there. Not only wasn't it passable, but there was no gap in the thick trees where it could have been. I became obsessed with that little lodge and hiked all over the hill in the warm weather. There is no path, and there is no lodge. I hiked every inch between those 2 slopes that summer and years after, and I still go up there when I'm home to visit. That lodge just isn't there. Where Did the Time Go? By Uncle Josh. Sure, why not? I'll tell a story. It's an odd one that happened to me in high school one night when a friend and I were out messing around our town, just looking to do something. It was early spring, and we decided to walk through a large park near our neighborhood to a reportedly haunted house. We lived out in the suburbs, and there was a way to get to the house by a main road, but rather than do that and walk up the house's long driveway, we thought it would be more fun to cross a creek at the edge of the park, sneak through a very thick underbrush and wooded area, and come up behind the house. It was about 7 at night and dark, so we had flashlights and were playing it low as the park was closed at sundown, and due to a couple of rape attempts, the cops weren't fooling around with anyone caught in there after dark. It's a huge park and has lots of roads and playgrounds and shelters and a big casino right in the middle. The fuzz could chase you down without an issue unless you got onto one of the islands that connected the north end of the park proper. The bridges weren't wide enough for cars. We lived on the northern side, so we went over those islands, skirted the edge of the park looking out for cops or rangers, and we went behind a toboggan hill to an old stone staircase that led down to the creek. We crossed it and then began the bushwhack to the house. It took a while, and I remember asking Dee what time it was, and he said it was 8. We trudged along and made our way up the steep hill for our pay dirt, and soon enough, there she was. I mean, this was a massive, massive house set way back from the street, and the only building out there. Sidebar, before it was torn down, a bunch of my friends and I went out to see it in the day, and we went inside. It was one of the biggest houses I've ever been in. And the second floor had something like 9 bedrooms, and not closet bedrooms, I'm talking bedrooms with fireplaces and everything. Anyway, Dee and I sneak up, and the many, many windows are dark. But it turns out someone was still living there at that time, and we saw them in their kitchen. Our cars parked outside, and we realized we weren't on a haunted house hunt anymore. We were now creepy peeping toms. We went back to the park roughly the way we came, and we stopped to check out a trail we had never seen before, and I wanted a smoke. We hung out in the dark just chatting, the only light coming from the cherry from my Lucky. Yeah, I was one of those 14-year-old guys. You know, if you're gonna smoke, smoke. Filters are for lightweights. Dee looks at his watch and says we'd better get going. It was 5 after 9 and we were supposed to be home by 10. We faintly heard the village clock tower ringing out 9 rings, signifying the top of the hour. We crossed the creek and crept up the stairs and saw 2 cops in their cars parked at the casino talking through their windows. Shit. There's no way we can get by them. So we sneak along the edge of the ravine and head up the toboggan hill to wait them out. I don't know how long we were up there, but I remember smoking 4 or 5 butts. I'm guessing about a half hour, all the while wishing these cops would just move on. We can faintly see the clock tower in our town hall off in the distance, and we hear the ringing of the hourly bell. We count the rings and we see the cops move off after a few minutes, but there was something wrong. Couldn't put my finger on it right away until I said, "How many rings was that?" Dee was staring at me and said, 9. He turned his flashlight on and looked at his watch. It was 9:05. I looked down and counted my cigarette butts, looked up at him wide-eyed and said, "What the fuck, dude? We've been up here for at least half an hour." He shook his head and said, "I know. I don't understand this. Let's get the hell out of here." We took off running down the hill back over the islands, cut through 2 yards, and we were back in our neighborhood. We went to his house, still in shock, and kept asking one another, what the fuck just happened? When we went inside, his watch said it was 9:25. It wasn't broken, something that I immediately thought of as the most logical explanation. How did we spend all that time with none of it actually expiring? We busted out his Atari 800, played some games, and then I went home. We still talk about this today when we hang out, and we still can't figure out what the hell happened that night. It wasn't a dream. We didn't get zapped by aliens. We had just spent 20 or 30 minutes talking, and I was smoking, and according to his watch and the clock tower, never really happened. Where did the time go? Thanks for listening, gang. I hope you liked it. And yeah, that really did happen to me. I got a story submitted and immediately texted my friend, and we went back and forth about it, and I thought, let me see if I can find some other cool Matrix stories. Please like, share, and comment, and hey, why not subscribe while you're at it if you haven't already done so? If you'd like to leave me a tip, you can just click on the link to my Patreon page in the description, and follow me on social media. The links are all in the description as well. See you soon with more true scary stories, and hey, don't forget to submit yours. Email unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. Until next time, be wary of things that go bump in the night. Could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.